Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Fithri Shalihah, and I'm a technology specialist at Telstra within the network analytics and modeling team. I want to share with you a trip I took last year, halfway across the world. Big data and the analytics behind it really helped me plan for that trip and really uplift my experience as a customer. So, quick question. How many of you have ever heard of or used Melways? A few people? Do you guys still use it? Not really? I can guess why. It's quite heavy, right? It's 1.2 kilograms in weight. It's really quite static, so if there's any updates on the streets in a new suburb, you'd have to wait for a new version to come up and buy that. And it costs about $70 nowadays to purchase. Comes with a USB with a digital copy, but it's quite inconvenient to carry around, right? This site would look quite familiar to you. It's essentially a digital version of that, but obviously with far more reach and coverage. So how many of you have used Google Maps in the last week, at least once? Almost everybody. My guess is that it's very, very convenient, right? And only really as heavy as your mobile phone. I'm assuming if you've got a smartphone, it'll be about 150 grams or so. And accessible, and it's free. So if you've got an internet connection, just download it and you're good to go. When I say free, that's at a monetary value. So I'll touch on how our own data can be quite an asset in this. And another massive value add to this is that it's not just coming from the one source that Melway, for example, used to build their products. It comes from billions of data sources, from the billions of users that uses Google Maps. Now, Sergey Brin and Larry Page founded Google exactly 20 years ago with the vision to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. This is something that I love. It's absolutely because of a lot of things that I've been working on, but also how much value it's added to my own life as an individual. So let me take you quickly back to this image of Google Maps. So as I mentioned earlier, there's 1 billion users on Google. And as you can see, there's blues, oranges, and reds. And this comes out of the analytics that Google takes from your devices and processes to predict where there's going to be congestion. It changes the way we look at maps from trying to understand where we can go and how we can get there, for example, turn left or turn right, to the deeper experiential question, such as, how am I going to get there? What route is best to take? So by utilizing these massive amounts of data that Google processes, you can figure out which route is the most efficient. We consume so rapidly nowadays that sometimes it's hard to stop and think about how we're contributing to these resources that we use every day, digital resources. And a big enabler of that is that crowdsourced data. There are many other examples of using crowdsourced data. For example, when you're a startup, you want to start a new company, and you could crowdsource a lot of those resources to start a website, for example, so someone can get experience up. Now, before I land in Buenos Aires, I want to plan on how I'm going to pick a place to stay, right? And some of the key things I'd want to consider is how accessible it is to public transport, how close it is to museums and galleries and key interest areas. One of the platforms that I chose to try out was Airbnb. Hands up, who's ever tried Airbnb here before? Most of you as well. Who's hosted Airbnb? Yes. So my guess for hosting is to utilize the unused room or couch that you have, right? And on top of that, it's a perfect example of earning extra cash. And for the rest of us who's used it, you save a lot of money from that. You get to understand how it's like living with a local. So traditionally, the relationship with resources that we have, we'd like to own things. We rarely like to share things. But we're kind of forced to go into the sharing economy given the increasing living expenses. And why not make use of those resources that we have? Another example is a drill, for example. You'd want to build a planter box once in your backyard. So you go to Bunnings and you buy a drill. You use it once and then it sits and taking space in your garage. Why not save the space in your garage and hire it from Bunnings or from someone else who might not use it? This utilising unutilized asset becomes an extra income that you have. Not only that there's an obvious monetary value there, it's also a massive help to the environment. We're kind of helping to slow down that consumerism that we have as we exponentially grow in population. The sharing economy itself is not a new one. With the digital boom, with devices becoming a lot more capable of processing data and the network becoming a lot more efficient as well, we're able to use the digital platform to better utilize the sharing economy and consume collaboratively. Now, there is a concept in psychology called Gestalt Theory, which attempts to describe how people tend to organize visual elements into groups or unified wholes. And I wanted to bring this example in how we look at data. Data in itself is really meaningless unless there's a human factor to it, unless we give context to it, right? Billions and billions of data in the world can really be used to improve our lives collectively and as individuals when we come together and apply analytics to it. So another example from a business perspective, there's lots of small businesses and the startup community is really thriving at the moment. One of the biggest help that big data is doing and the analytics of that is an example in Google how you could watch traffic of customers into your business and you could see at what times the business could be busy. From that, the businesses can use, I guess, as a plan to when do they need more staff to cater for those customers. That's really helped. Another view is that also it could really help bridge the economic gap we have. Now that almost everybody have access to a mobile device, including the developing countries, we could really tap those consumers to help kind of bridge that gap as well. There's this shift from access over ownership. People no longer really want to own things, as opposed to how we want the benefits of utilizing those resources. Rachel Botsman coined a great TED Talk as well on collaborative consumption and how trust is becoming the token at which we kind of speak in this new economy. And it's obviously a hard one to kind of give to, when you're talking to companies, you worry about your privacy and you're giving away your data. And I guess instead of kind of blindly distrusting them or blindly trusting them, let's start the conversation on how can we better secure our data with this company at the same time we as consumers benefit from it. I wanted to reiterate how coming together with the analytics behind these massive amounts of data can really benefit our lives. Just like the cats are really, they become warm when they huddle instead of being cold by themselves. The one last key takeaway, if any, I want you to go home with is that big data is not just about data. It's about the analytics, it's about the human context. So where I work, we look at so many different sources of data. There's network data, consumer data, and we need to really understand what part of the network activities affects different consumer behaviours and vice versa. So there's a lot of the capacity planning that we do in our networks, like when the AFL Grand Final comes around, we've seen from the past that the mobile cells around the area will get congested because there'll be more people. So we learn from our past that by how much should we increase the capacity in those areas, for example. As you go away thinking about that, analytics is so important, having a human touch is so important. There's massive platforms as well for you to start playing around with the huge levels of data that we have. GovHack is an example in Victoria where the government actually encourages you to play around with the open data and come up with solutions for community and society. Remember, without analytics behind it and without the human context, big data, it's really just data. Thank you.